For so many of us, as we get louder and faster when we're playing, our sticks tend to slide out of control. We either lose them entirely, or we cramp up, our thumbs cramp up as we're trying to squeeze them, just holding on for dear life, making sure they don't fall out of our hands. Well, today I'll teach you exactly how to control the amount of pressure you're putting on your stick at your fulcrum so that you don't have to get stiff and tight as you get louder and faster. This is a huge win when it comes to playing any big, loud, fast rock song. I think this is going to help you out a bunch and solve a whole bunch of frustration and literally pain. You can do this. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome to the Non-Glamorous Drummer. I'm so glad you're here hanging out with me today. I'm here to help you become the drummer everybody wants to play with, who sounds creative and musical and confident and solid. And we do this by mastering the core drumming skills that elevate everything else and that help us achieve growth more rapidly. Speaking of that, I want you to dig into, this is my free gift to you, totally free mini course. You can enroll in this mini course. It's called 3 Steps to Eliminating Your Weak Hand. Most likely, if I were to guess, most likely you've dealt with a weak hand and it's wreaked havoc on literally everything you're trying to play. And the worst thing for so many people, they eventually settle for this and they're just like, okay, my left hand isn't going to be as good as my right hand, so my fills may never sound that good, my groove might never be as good as it could be, never going to be the drummer I could be, and it's sad and it's pathetic, and I don't want that for you. I don't want you to settle for a weak left hand. Let's nail fills. Let's be confident on the drums, just nailing stuff, laying it down, because we know that our grip is together and that both hands are equally capable at excelling at this instrument. So I want you to join my totally free mini course, Eliminate Your Weak Hand in 3 Steps. This method has been a huge game changer for so many students. I've been teaching this to my one-on-one students for years, and it's helped them see so much growth with their fills, so much more musicality and just freedom in mastering their weak hand. So that's what I want for you too. I believe you can do this. You can master your weak hand, and that's going to help a lot with what we're getting into today. In this course, we talk about some of what we are covering today in this lesson, and then beyond that. So be sure to check out the weak hand course, because this is going to help you out with this lesson today. So let's dive in. We've actually covered this topic recently, and if you're a true fan of this channel and you've watched a bunch of these lessons, you might have caught it not too long ago where we were talking about how to not lose your sticks as you go louder and faster. But today we want to take a more specific look at fulcrum. So we want to get even more detailed and kind of take a deep dive into what can we do at our fulcrum point to ensure we don't lose our sticks and not have to get too stiff and tight. And so this is kind of a unique perspective on this. So first, we'll talk about the big reason why a lot of drummers are losing their sticks. Why is it that happens? Why do our sticks fly out? Why do we lose our sticks when we're playing? And then we'll talk about 2 different potential ways to fix this. So 2 options. Options are great. I'll give you an option 1 and an option 2, and the one that I think you should go with. And we'll talk about your step-by-step solution. We'll break this down into very achievable, specific action steps, so that you can work these fulcrum things and make sure that your sticks are not going to fly out as you get louder and faster. So action-packed, specific, mechanical kind of lesson that all you need is your sticks and your pad to play along with me and to practice this. I love these kinds of lessons because this will help in so many areas, especially if you're playing loud, fast rock songs. Like if you're into like Green Day, if you're into Foo Fighters, if you're into Paramore, like whatever some of my go-to big, loud, fast rock, punk rock kind of bands, you need to have your grip together, because otherwise you're going to be cramping up, you're going to be exhausted, you're going to run out of steam by the end of the song, you're not going to be loud enough, you're going to have a hard time keeping up. So it's important we've got these core things down so that we're able to think about the music and have fun playing rather than being stressed out about how tired our hands are getting. So we want to be very specific and strategic about how we do this. Here's the big reason why I think most of us are losing our sticks. The problem is that we're not changing our grip as we get faster, because the grip that we use at slow tempos will not necessarily work at fast tempos. And so if we've got a great relaxed grip together when we're going slow, that's fantastic, but if we don't change anything as we go faster, then the stick's going to fly out. That's just what's going to happen, because you've got that force of the stick moving, and if we don't do something, it's going to fly out. And so what tends to happen is, to try to solve that problem, we end up clamping down too much and we get too tight. And so as we get too tight, then we start feeling pain, we're working harder than we need to, our thumbs are cramping up, and so either we're losing our sticks or we're in pain. It's kind of like one or the other. So how do we balance the looseness with the control? That's the challenge here. That's what we're working to overcome. Now, there's a default prerequisite grip I want to make sure you have. So we got to cover this briefly before we get into what to do to play loud and fast well. But the prerequisite is this. Form your fulcrum point. I like doing middle finger about right here. So about halfway up my middle finger. That's my sweet spot. Now note that this is not the pad of your thumb. We're not thumbprinting the stick. If you do that, you're going to get so much friction that it's going to be stiff and your thumb is going to want to follow the stick. And that's not what we want. We want to form a hinge point. So what you want to do is actually place your thumb kind of like this on the stick, where it's kind of the edge of your thumb pressed on there up against midway up your middle finger, or you could do index finger. I like middle because it's the most relaxed. So I recommend starting with that when you're playing slowly. But make sure, so test this out by going like this. So whether it doesn't matter which hand you're doing this with, I'm doing my left hand because of camera angle here. So get this in position, and then with your other hand, just swing the stick back and forth and test out, all right, how much pressure do I need to put here on the fulcrum right here on our hinge point to make sure that the stick stays in place. Now, I recommend if you're watching this in a dry climate or if it's winter, your hands might be dry and slick, so maybe you need to put some lotion on. Maybe you need to breathe on them, like get them a little bit sticky. Do whatever you got to do, because you definitely, if your hands are super dry, the stick has a tendency to slide and you end up having to squeeze too hard to compensate for that. So sometimes that's a good quick fix here, just making sure your hands are clammy. I put on some lotion an hour or so ago, and so I've got a nice, stickiness to my hands that is perfect for playing the drums. And so I feel like I can confidently play something loud and fast right now because I can grip well. You could also look into those grip sticks that have like coatings and stuff on them. Definitely a good solution sometimes. So that's kind of something else to think about if you're running into issues like that. But test this out. See, all right, how much pressure do I need to put here? Because if there's no pressure, the stick's going to pop out. But if you squeeze too tight, well, then it's just, it's too tight. So what you want to do is be as light, like press as lightly as possible, but not so light that the stick pops out. We don't want that. So that's what you've got to test out. That's what you have to figure out for yourself. I can't tell you how much pressure to put here. You've got to figure it out, but test this out. This is our prerequisite. So if you need to pause the video here, work on this for a few minutes, and then hit play again, it's totally fine. Or if this is the main thing after the end of today that you need to work on and then come back to everything else, that's totally fine too. Beauty of learning on YouTube, you can work at your own pace. So this needs to be happening because the whole purpose behind this, the more stick motion that you can have within your hand, the less hard your wrists have to work. Because look at this, I can have the stick moving a whole bunch, but my wrist is not having to move a whole bunch. Versus if I'm stiff and tight, suddenly I got to move a lot, and this is putting strain on my wrist and requiring way more work from my forearm than we want. So that's the whole purpose here. If you can have a fulcrum, a hinge point, it allows the stick to move loosely, independent of your range of motion. You are the catalyst for making that movement happen, but the stick's able to move a lot more than you are. You want it to be an extension of your arm that moves way further than your hand is. And so that makes everything a lot easier as we want to go louder and faster. So know that that's the prerequisite. Focus on that if that's what you need to focus on. Now let's talk about two potential ways to solve the issue of losing the sticks as we get louder and faster. Option number one, I call this the index shift. And this is where if our prerequisite relaxed slow grip is a middle finger fulcrum, what we can do is shift to more of an index finger. We can curve the index around like this, because previously the index is just hanging out up here, kind of a guardrail in a way, not really doing much, but we can curve the index down like this so that as we're getting louder and faster, we can just literally shift our fulcrum to here. Maybe there's kind of, still fulcrum somewhat middle finger and index, but for the most part, we've shifted it to here and we've closed things down a little bit more. So now we've got more pressure on the fulcrum and therefore we're maintaining more control and the stick doesn't fly out. This, by the way, is actually what we can do when we're playing very softly. If you're playing quietly, you don't need the stick moving within your hand. So actually you want to do something like this, where you're doing more of an index finger fulcrum. Fingers are all resting gently against the stick and you're just playing lightly from your wrist. That's fine because we don't need a lot of motion here. It's just a light motion. You'll get more stability and control, whether you're going this slow or this fast, when you're gripping more firmly playing from your wrist. So that's kind of a side note. Great tip for playing slowly, by the way. If you're wanting to do ghost notes well and play in a controlled manner with low stick height, this is the key. But this doesn't work so well if you're needing to stay really loud, because if you're having to clamped down like this, you're stiffening up and you're getting kind of tight. And it's not to say this doesn't work, because this can work, but you just have to be careful when we're getting stiff, when we're firming up as we're playing louder and faster. We want to be careful how we're doing that. And furthermore, we want to make sure that we're holding off as long as possible before we get stiff. So what we want to land on today is, okay, how fast can I go before I have to stiffen up? That's the challenge. We don't want to stiffen up too early, otherwise we get way too tight and stiff by the time we're going fast. We want to stay as loose as we can for as long as we can before getting tight. So that leads us into option 2. I call this the pressure change. Now, with our index shift, we did a little bit of a pressure change. With the index finger, we put more pressure on the stick there. But what we want to do here with option 2 is, without bringing the index around, all that we want to do is put a little bit more pressure on the fulcrum point. So remember, we've got our fulcrum here, our hinge point. We don't need a lot of pressure on it to do this, just enough to keep it in place, especially when we're playing lightly like this. But what we can do as we get faster, if we're keeping this stick height, that means we're going to be getting a little bit louder as we're going faster. We can refuse to bring the index in yet. We don't want to get so tight up here in our hand. We can stay loose in our hand if we put a little bit more pressure here, specifically on the fulcrum point. And that works because as we're going faster, there's more energy going on here, so the stick is still going to have this full range of motion even with more pressure. And that pressure is necessary because, as we know, if we're not putting enough pressure, the stick flies out. What you can do is allow the stick, maybe starting out your fulcrum was like here. It's great to have it out here closer to the end of your finger if you want to do that. But what you want to do is allow it to come a little bit further up, because what can be very helpful actually is allowing your fulcrum to shift further up that middle finger as you go faster. So maybe you start here when you're super light and loose, but you actually allow it to move up a little ways, maybe past this point right here as you're getting faster. And so it's easier to be firm and more controlled that way without getting too stiff if you allow that fulcrum to slide up closer to the palm. That can be super helpful. And this works great when we're needing to stay really loud with a lot of stick motion. The stick still moves freely, even with this fulcrum pressure, because there's so much energy going on. And so we're keeping this kind of free, loose motion without index curling around tightly, but we're maintaining control of the sticks. So let's compare these two. I'm going to demonstrate both of these. So here's the index shift. This is option 1. Option 1, the index shift, ends up looking like this. Or by the time we're fast, we're looking just like this. Now here's option 2. Or by the time we've gotten fast, now we're looking like this. So we've got our index right here, but instead of curling around and moving the fulcrum up here, we've kept it down here on middle finger. We've just firmed up. We put a little more pressure here. And because we've allowed the stick to be up here, we're not having to put a lot of pressure on with our thumb. I think this helps avoid the thumb cramping issue, because if you're trying to stay down here, if you're staying down here, I think you end up, I say I think because it's hard to say exactly. I've noticed this in my experience where if I'm trying to tighten up here, I end up pressing too much with my thumb, flexing this muscle too much, which can lead to thumb cramping. But if the stick comes up here, it's almost like you can put more pressure here without having to press as hard. Yeah, I know it sounds weird, but you'll notice this. Play around with it. Play around with it, because as you get further up here, it's almost like the thumb can more easily put pressure on the stick without having to press as hard. You'll notice that when you press right here, this muscle is still kind of soft, versus when you press out here, this muscle is really firm. I want you to do that. If you've got your sticks and your pad right here, even just your sticks, even if you don't have a stick in your hand, you can do this without a stick. Press right here with your thumb. You'll notice, all right, this muscle right here is tight. Now come into here and press. You'll notice that this right here is not as tight. The flexing is more like over here in a way. I don't know exactly where it's at. Any of you doctors, anatomy experts out there, you can feel free to chime in here and tell us what the joints are working and what the muscles are here working. But you'll notice that difference. And so I think this is a very interesting thing, because it means that you can get tighter, get stiffer, get firmer, so you can control the stick more without stiffening up in the sense that you get cramps. I used to deal with thumb cramping all the time, when, especially playing Sunday mornings at my church, we would launch into a fast upbeat song at 6:30 a.m. or 6:45, early Sunday mornings, and sometimes it was January and my hands were cold. It was hard to get warmed up. And my thumbs would literally be hurting. Like this whole muscle right here would hurt, and I don't have to massage my hand afterwards. And so I started to realize I've got to make some changes. I really need to work on refining my technique because ain't nobody got time to deal with this. And if you've been there, if you've been dealing with thumb cramping and just soreness in your hands, I hope this is your solution. I hope that this can remedy it because I don't want you dealing with that. So experiment with this. Instead of putting the pressure up here and trying to not lose the stick way out here, just allow it to come further within your hand so that it's a more effortless pressure. This just might be huge for you. This just might be your ticket to playing loud and fast songs with ease. So practice this with both hands. I've been doing it with my left hand here, and left hand is actually a good hand to start with, whether you're right-handed or left-handed. If you're playing backbeats with your left hand, there's a lot of this up and down, and you don't want to be stiff with your backbeats. You want to still have this loose, relaxed motion, so you're just throwing the stick into the drum. If you're hitting rim shots, or if you're not hitting rim shots, you want to have that loose kind of motion. And so focus a lot on your left hand with this. And then with your right hand, focus on just the exact same thing. Sit here and practice eighth notes on your pad, quarter notes. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much what you're practicing here as it does how you're practicing it. Our how is we're focusing on this fulcrum point and the shift that we've got to make as we go louder and as we go faster. So let's do a little bit of review. This is the step-by-step, just to put all this into a nice step-by-step plan for you. 3 steps, action steps to make sure you're doing this right. So just to sum all this up, make this super clear. Step 1, form your fulcrum with the edge of the thumb and middle finger. And I'd say go for about halfway up your middle finger. You can start down here. Again, you can start closer to the end if you want to. This works for the very slow, quiet kind of playing. That's great. And when I say quiet, I mean still full stick height, but like this kind of playing. Because remember, if we're super quiet, we can firm up and do this. But if we're playing in this nice, slow, relaxed manner, you can be out here if you want to. But yeah, I'd recommend starting about halfway up that middle finger. Aim for that. That's our step 1. So establish this point where you're going to grip. Make sure your thumb is at about this angle. We're not planting our thumbprint on the stick. That's going to result in too much stiffness. Instead, we want it to be the edge of the thumb. And over time, you'll start to form a little bit of a callus there, probably. Not like a guitar player kind of callus, but just tougher skin there. And that'll actually help this. My theory is that the more you do this, the more you build up a slight callus, which actually helps with having a smooth hinging motion without the stick getting stuck. I'm not entirely sure if that's true because I definitely don't have major calluses on my thumbs, but you might find that over time this actually gets easier as your skin toughens up there. Step 2, practice tossing the stick. When I say tossing the stick, first we're just doing this, so just hinging it. Do as little pressure as possible to be able to do this without it popping out. Remember, if it pops out, we know that's too little pressure. But too much means it's stiff and it's not really working. So be as light as you can here so you can get this going on. And then once you've done this, see if you can just toss it like this. So we're lifting, we're putting a little pressure here to lift, toss the stick back, and then toss it back down. Just practice doing this back and forth, so you're air playing. And what you'll find is that you have to do a little bit more fulcrum pressure to air play like this than you do to actually hit the pad, which is kind of cool. And so then when we get to step 3 is just translate this to the pad, you'll actually find you can relax a little bit more, especially when you've got a nice bouncy kind of rebound from your pad. This pad, by the way, is an Aquarian Super Pad. I love these. These are my favorite practice pads. I think they feel great. They've kind of got like a foamy mesh kind of feel instead of that hard rubber that you get with a lot of the typical pads. You do pay a little bit more for these. I think I paid $60 for this pad. I personally think it's well worth it. I love this pad because you can snap it onto your drum. It fits in with this rubber gasket. It fits inside the metal rim of your snare. You can buy them any size to fit different drums. Plus, you can take it off and it becomes freestanding too. This is not an official endorsement. I've never been sponsored by Aquarian. I'm just a fan of their super pads. So if you want to check them out, definitely do. I think it's a great feeling pad because it's not hard on your hand. It doesn't feel like you're smacking a table. Nothing against the Evans Real Feel pads. Those are great beginner pads, but they're just very hard. And so it almost feels like you've got a tabletop and maybe you've laid like a thin piece of rubber on that table and you're just smacking a piece of wood. That's kind of how it feels. And so it can be tough on your hands ultimately, but it's got a little bit of squish to it. So I say all that because I know there's always questions about what kind of pad this is because it is kind of unique. Aquarian Super Pad, this is the 14-inch one that just fits onto my snare. So as you're starting to work this on the pad and you're getting the bounce going, I recommend start with eighth note singles, somewhere right around 60. Be as loose and relaxed as possible, as little pressure on the fulcrum as possible, yet to keep it hinging. So you want to have as little pressure as possible. Now, gradually begin upping the tempo and gradually put more pressure on that fulcrum and allow, again, for the fulcrum to shift from here a little bit further up. That way, your thumb isn't having to press like that and tighten this muscle. Instead, it's just gently going this way, which means this muscle should be relaxed. That's a great way to test it. As you're doing this, just test, okay, how does this muscle feel? I don't know if any of you guys are into grilling, but you know that guideline where when you're grilling a steak, if you want it to be well done, you want it to feel like that, where thumb to pinky. You want it like medium well, you want it to feel like that, medium, rare, etc. So what you want here is for your thumb muscle here to be rare. We want it to feel like a rare steak. Starting to get hungry now. Want it to feel like a rare steak. If it's feeling like a well done steak, nobody wants a well done steak. Let's be honest. Really, nobody wants a steak that's like past medium rare. That's just me. I think rare steaks are the best. We need some purple. If it's feeling medium well or like way too done, you know you're putting too much pressure here, and you might start feeling that thumb cramp to show for it. So just make sure this is staying relaxed. Again, this takes time. It takes some time. Remember, you're building new muscle memory. You're building new habits here. You're establishing some new mechanics and a new motion if you haven't done this before. So definitely be patient with it. But focus on making sure that fulcrum is shifting up to here a little bit, or pressing kind of with the side of the thumb, and we're just putting more pressure on that fulcrum as we go faster. But again, we want to stay as loose as we can. So what you want to do is test the limits here. And as you get to like 100, how loose can you be before it slides out? If it slides out, okay, go a little bit firmer. As you get to 120. At 120, you got to start being a little bit firmer, but again, try not to get too tight. Same at 140. You want to make sure you're always feeling where that fulcrum point is. And I know just now I was feeling like right here on that joint is where it's at when I get up to about 140. The faster you get, the more you'll have to press, and the more that fulcrum can shift up to here. And of course, once you get super fast, it does become more of a workout. You're having to use some wrist, you're having to use some arm, and there's a lot of muscles at work here when you get really fast. And so that kind of becomes another story once we get that fast. But right now, I want you focusing on the slow tempos, on establishing this, making sure that you're focusing on that fulcrum pressure, making sure it's staying loose. I'd say don't worry about, 140, 160. Eventually you want to get there, but focus on gradually going from eighth notes at 60 up to eighth notes at about 120. So I really hope that this helps remedy some thumb pain, some frustration from losing the sticks. I hope that a lot of frustration is ending today. I want you to have the patience, though, to really work these things. These are tiny little details, and it does require some patience, and it might mean rewiring the grip you've been doing. If you've been playing for a while, you might have to go back and redo some things. That's totally fine. I've had so many students do that, and it is hard. You have to be diligent with it and really disciplined and focus on really paying attention to what your hand is doing as you're building, like rebuilding habits. Versus if you're a total beginner and you're learning this from scratch, good for you, learning the right way. That's a big plus. If you're here and you're learning this the first time, I'm so glad you're here, because this means you're on the right track and everything's going to be easier for you down the road as a result of getting your hand technique squared away. But if you're having to relearn grip, know that this is a process. It takes time. It takes patience. Be patient with yourself. Take pride and satisfaction on being a little bit better today than you were yesterday, making slow progress. And I mentioned this in another video. Be thankful for the amount of progress you've made. Like, have some gratitude for where you're at right now. Don't constantly be wishing to be here, constantly wanting to goals are good things. Not at all saying goals are bad or milestones are bad, but don't focus and fixate so much on where you're wanting to go with this. Like, all right, I want to play Everlong. I've got to play Everlong, or I've got to play American Idiot. Just thinking through some fast rock songs. Yes, those are great goals to have, but don't fixate so much on that specifically that you lose motivation because you're like, oh, I still can't do it. I couldn't do it last week. I can't do it today. I'm never going to be able to do this. And then you start feeling sorry for yourself and being pitiful. Don't be pitiful. Take these steps. Work specifically on these steps and say, hey, I am happy that this is coming along and it's a little bit better today than it was yesterday, which means it's going to be better tomorrow than it was today. And a good bit better next week and a lot better next month. And before I know it, I'm going to be able to play Everlong. I'm going to be able to play American Idiot. I'm going to be able to play Mr. Brightside and like all these favorite songs that have a lot of just quick, loud playing. And it takes practice and preparation to be able to do those. But here's what's cool. Once you get to where you can play one of those songs because you've diligently practiced this fulcrum stuff, then you'll be able to play all of those songs. And so focusing on this is the core skill that gives you the ability to excel at the across the board things. Like, you'll be able to nail songs so much more easily if you master this. So you can do this. I believe in you. You can do this. Be patient with yourself. Practice these steps. Film yourself in slow motion. Set your smartphone up. Film yourself in slow motion. Practice in front of a mirror. Whatever you've got to do to give yourself some real feedback. That's super helpful also. All right. Before you go, I want you to join my weak hand mini course. It's totally free. My free gift to you. It's called Eliminate Your Weak Hand in 3 Steps. It literally is just 3 quick lessons for eliminating that weak hand. We talk a lot about what we talked about today, and then we dig into some coordination, hand-to-hand coordination, and all sorts of tips and strategies for just eliminating that weak hand so you can nail fills and just feel confident on the kit. Confidence is what we want. You got to have confidence to be able to play things well and in a compelling, musical, solid manner. And it's hard to be confident when you've got a weak hand holding you back. So I want you to eliminate that. So enroll in the course, totally free. My gift to you. I hope to see you there. As always, thanks so much for hanging out today. This was a fun lesson. I love stuff on hand technique. I know it's so core and it's so crucial and sometimes mundane, but so critical and helpful and so actionable. You could play along with me throughout this lesson, which I hope you were. If you weren't, pull out your sticks and pad. Go do it now. Take action on this. Follow these steps. But hey, be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new. Be sure to enroll in the mini course, and I hope you have a great week. I'll see you on the next lesson. In the meantime, know that you can do this. Stay non-glamorous.